gentlemen, this is Miss Jermaine. Just coming at you with a video going through the second activity for today. So in class today, we were able to go through and look at some and talk about proportional relationships. If we remember back, proportional relationships are graphs or equations that have a common rate of change between your x and your y, and they have to start graphically at the letter at 0, 0, your origin. Okay, so if we look at our learning targets for today, it said I can graph a proportional relationship from an equation, and I can tell when two graphs are the same proportional relationship, even if the scales are different. This is where this activity that we're going to be doing in the afternoon today is going to come in. It's going to look at that second learning target of I can tell when two graphs are the same proportional relationship, even if the scales are different. So we're going to be looking at a bunch of different graphs, and we're going to be sorting them out, the graphs that were given, by the different relationships and the different scales, the different slopes that they have for each of those graphs. So we went through activity number 1 in class today. We're going to do activity number 2 right now, It is called, not different scales, that's the one we did in class. We're looking at proportional relationships card sort. Activity 2.2. Okay, so we start on slide number 15. We're on the slides today because this activity cannot be done in your book because you don't have copies of the card sort. So this needs to 100% be done on the slides. I will be checking back to make sure that all of this work is done, but I want you to do this in your slides, not in your book. Okay, so if we look at slide number 16, here are directions for the activity. So the teacher, that's me, oh my goodness, that's me, Miss Jermaine. I'm going to be giving you 10, actually I believe I actually ended up giving you 11 graphs. 11 graphs of proportional relationships. So your job is to sort the graphs into groups based on what proportional relationship they represent, their slope. Okay, and I'm going to say that I gave you the equations that you need to look at for each equation and calculate the slope and match it to the equation. So let me tell you what that means. So what you're doing on these next 3 slides here, it says, I'm going to get rid of this slide right here because I don't like it. And it doesn't actually match what we're doing. So what you're doing on slide 17, 18, and 19 is you're going to actually be calculating the slopes of each one of these lines. So let me show you, we're going to do the first one together, and then I'm going to have you pause the video, calculate your slopes, and then we're going to sort them. So let me show you what I need you to do for this piece right here. So let me just come over here. And let me grab my mouse so that I can do this with you. So let's do graph number 1. So what I want you to do is I want you to do this along with me. And when I do something, I want you to pause it, and I want you to do it on your slideshow as well. Okay, so for each one of these graphs, we are going to be calculating the slope. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to have to draw in our slope triangle. And this guy was actually pretty nice because we were actually given the points that we're going to use to create our slope triangle. So you're going to take these lines right here, and I did A, so I sort of put this underneath A, and I'm going to line it up with the origin. And I'm going to have to pull it and yank it over until it hits where the point is, okay? So then you're going to grab this other one here, line it up with the point on this graph, grab the end of it, and connect it to create our slope triangle. Okay, so you're creating your slope triangle. Then you're going to grab these boxes right here to label your rise and your run. Okay, so if I calculate my slope on this one, I go over from 0 to 24. So that has a run of 24. Okay, then if I calculate my rise, I'm going up 6. Making sure that you are looking at the scale of the graph, not just counting the number of boxes, because you might have said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but 6 is not correct because you need to look at the scale. So this one has a run of 24, a rise of 16, or of 6, Mr. Maine, 6. And then I need to write it as a fraction of my rise over my run, because that's what slope is written as, rise over run. And that's where this box down below comes in play. And you're going to write your rise, which if you look at that slope triangle, my rise is going to be 6. And then you're going to come down here. I'm sorry, let me try that again. Went too far. And I'm going to get rid of a couple of these lines here. Okay, so it has a rise of 6, and if you click down in the bottom here, it'll let you type underneath the line in a run of 24. Okay, and if I take that fraction and I type it into my calculator, or I'm going to link on here, there's going to be a link for you to a calculator. I want you to actually divide it and figure out what that slope is going to be. Divide that by saying 6 divided by 24. 6 divided by 24 is going to get me 0.25. So the slope of this line right here is going to be 0.25. Okay? So that would be the slope of that line right there, 0.25. So I got my slope. It's equal to 0.25. So then what I need to do with this graph, before I start to sort them, what I want you to do is for each one of these, I want you to pause your video. I want you to start the timer back on the direction page, and I want you to take the 10 minutes to calculate the slope of each one of these lines. So once again, you're going to grab these lines right here. You're going to create your slope triangle. You might need to pull it back a little bit for this one. You're going to label your rise and your run using these boxes. You're going to write your slope as your rise over your run. And from there, then you're going to do that for all 11 of these graphs. Okay? So pause your video and calculate your slopes of each one of these lines. Pause, please. Okay, so I was able to go through and I drew in all my slope triangles, labeled all my rises and runs. Now let's write these as fractions. So I need to calculate my rise and my run for card B here. I'm going to pull this guy over just so that I can type in here a little bit for myself. And I know that I'm talking about this guy B here. So if I'm talking about my rise here, I'm actually going to just write it on the board. You're going to type it into this box right here. It's going to be a rise of 6, a run of 2. So if I were to take that and put it in my calculator, let me turn my screen back so that you can still see me. Sorry, guys. So you take it and you put it into your calculator. You divide 6 divided by 2. 6 divided by 2 gets me a slope of 3. So it's equal to 3. Okay, and I'm going to reformat these boxes a little bit, and I'm going to put this equal sign in like a box so that you can write it in there a little bit better. So it's going to look a little bit different the way that I write it, but it's actually going to be more user-friendly on yours. So then if I'm looking at card C here, I have a rise of, if I write it as rise over run, this is going to have a rise of 175. And a run of 50. When I take that and I type that in my calculator, 175 divided by 50, that gets me a slope of 3.5. It equals 3.5. Okay? So I have this slope of 3. I have this slope of 3.5. Let's take a look at the next slide here with some more of them. Miss Jameen, get your words right, okay? So let me just put a little text box on here so that I remember that this is equal to 3. This one is equal to, and this is going to look a little bit better for you, 3.5. Okay? So you have your 3.5 and your 3. Okay, so now let's take a look at 18. So 18, remember we're writing these as rise over run. Rise over run. Okay, and when you're writing it as rise over run for graph E here, it would be rise of 12 over a run of 4, which is equal to, if you type it into your calculator, 12 divided by 4 gets me 3. Okay, so graph E has a slope of 3. Wonderful. Let's take a look at graph letter D now. I know yours looks a little bit different. I sort of had to make them a little bit more funky-dunky. If I come into this box right here and I write my rise over my run, it has a rise of 70, a run of 20. If I were to type that into my calculator, 70 divided by 20, that would get me a quotient of 3.5. Okay? So I'm going to once again write that on mine. If it is incorrect on yours, please take the time to write the correct slope there, 3.5. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Okay, now let's take a look at this last one, card F on the slide. Rise over run. My rise is 30. My run is 12. If I type that into my calculator, what do I get? 30 divided by 12 gets me a quotient of 2.5. Okay? So if I come and I write myself this answer in a text box here, 2.5. Okay? So that is slide number 18. The slopes for slide number 18. So now let's take a look at the last one, slide number 19. I have these guys here. Let me just erase a little bit. I'm going to write my slope of rise over run. Okay? And if I'm looking at this guy here, card G, it's going to be a rise of 28 over a run of 8, which is going to look like, when you type it into your calculator, a rise of 28 divided by 8 gets me a quotient of 3.5. Got a lot of ones that have a slope of 3.5 here, my friends. 3.5. Now if we look at this guy here, this middle one here, if I write it as a fraction of rise over run, 400 over 300, which when I divide will be equal to 1.5. I'm going to label my slope of this line here 1.5. And if we look at this last one down here, a fraction of rise over run, 30 over 10, which is equal to 3 when you type it into your calculator. Okay? So we have a rise of 30, a run of 10, which simplifies, as we said, to a slope of 3. Okay? So you just took some time to calculate the slopes of 9 different equations here. And we labeled those slopes here. So then now what you need to do is we need to go back and we need to sort them by the different slopes that we received. Okay? So when we do that, we're going to take a look at this one. It says 0.25, right? So then if we look at some of these graphs that we found here, which one of these graphs here had a slope of 0.25? Oh, I know this first one, A does. So what you're going to do is you're going to hit Control X. It's going to cut it out of there, right? And then you're going to paste it onto this slide that has the different, that has this slope here. Okay, so then the next one is 3.5. So we need to find all those graphs that have a slope of 3.5, which if we remember and we look here, we said that C had a slope of 3.5. I would hit cut. I would paste it in here. Go back to slide number 2. I know there were a couple that had 3.5 on this one. This one right here. I would cut it and I would paste it here. Okay, then if I want you to, we're going to do this last one together, 3.5. I know that this guy here had 3.5. I would cut it, come to this 3.5, and paste it in. Okay, so now what I want you to do is I want you to copy out the rest onto the slides that they match. So you're going to look at these other 2 slides here, other 2 slopes, and you're going to sort them by their slopes. I want you to hit pause on your video, and let's come back in 2 minutes to compare those last few matches that you made. Okay, so you took 2 minutes to sort these guys out. If you didn't get a chance to finish that up, that's okay. So let's take a look at these graphs that so first of all, you're gonna have a lot of sort of, I wouldn't call it a mess, left over on these graph slides. Leave all of that right where it is. It's not a big deal. We can get rid of it later. Let's take a look at those matches that we made. So we're looking at 0.25x. We said card A had 0.25x as a slope, okay? 3.5, no, 3.5 had a slope. Which ones had a slope of 3.5? Was C, D, and G. Now, if we look at this 4/3, we said that only card I had a slope of 4/3. A slope of 3 was on card H, card B, and card E. And a slope of 5/2. This was probably the most tricky. If you type 5/2 into your calculator, you get 2.5. You could also say to yourself, how many times does 2 go into 5? 2.5 times. Card F, okay? So now, to finish off for today, your homework for this evening is going to be this cool down, 2.4. You're coming in, you're doing your first name, last name, cohort number, and you're going to use this image to answer the questions below. So you have 4 graphs here. Which one of these relationships is different than the other 3? So that means you need to look at the slopes and you need to calculate the slopes of all 4 of these graphs. And then one of those lines is going to have a different slope. So you need to calculate all 4, be like, which one does not have the same slopes as the other 3? And then tell me, how did you know that that one had a different slope? Boom, easy, not too bad. Hit submit when you're done. Once you finish going through all these activities here, you can hit turn in on this assignment. Awesome job, ladies and gentlemen. Let me give you the code word for today. Our code word for today is smiley face. Send me an email with the word phrase smiley face, okay? Awesome job. Reach out if you guys have questions. I will see you guys tomorrow.